I had this moment in my office with a prospective client the other day who asked me this question. How are you going to take what we want to do in our lives and turn that into a financial plan? And I thought it was such a weird question because I'm like, well, that's just what I do. I think it was one of those moments where I've just done this for so long that I've kind of forgotten. So I want to answer that question. Like, how do I take clients' needs, desires, wants, dreams, all the things, and put that into my financial planning software in such a way that they can now get their heads around how they're going to finance any of that and make it to the end of their lives without living in a box under a bridge eating cat food. So I'm going to answer that. And I think the underlying question with that is, how is your planning going to work for me? So I want to answer that question as well. And I want to do all this without turning this into an education about how my software works or going through like my entire process. But let me just talk to you about when clients have decided to move forward. We've had enough conversations and there's enough synergy that they feel like this is a good match. And I feel like it's a good match. We now move into a process where I do a series of deep dive meetings and I ask them all kinds of personal questions. While I am doing that, they are then uploading their data. Where's all their money, their accounts? Give me your estate planning, your insurance declaration pages, all the things, right? Just the data, the numbers, that sort of stuff. So they're doing that. And simultaneously, I'm doing a series of questions. We do this over a series. When I'm doing this virtually, we do it over a series of about 4 to 5 meetings that last about 45 minutes. And I've literally had clients reflect back to me that nobody's ever asked them these questions. They've never even covered this in therapy. Wow, it's really helped us to see kind of what our thoughts are about money and what we want to do with our lives. And it was been so helpful, especially if you're working with a partner or a spouse, to have a third party in the room to be able to just allow that person to talk so you can hear what they have to say when a third party's answering or asking those questions. So that series of questions is super important because that's where I really get to the meat of who are you? What do you want to do with your lives? At the end of the day, this is your money and it's your life. I don't really care what you do with it on some level. What I'm just trying to do is to make sure, number one, you're making good conscious decisions with it and you have some context with which to put those decisions into. Okay, if I do this, it impacts that. If I do that, it impacts this. And now how do I want to prioritize the assets that I've got? Because look, no shoulda, coulda, wouldas in my office either. You take what you have, you optimize it, and you do the best with it and make mid-flight corrections a lot. So those questions, when I'm asking them, over that series of meetings are things that are just about relationship to money. If money walked into the room, what would you say to it? What would it say back to you? What did you learn from your family of origin about money? Like what money lesson early in your life has stuck with you? We talk about those things. We talk about what you've accomplished so far in your life and what you have yet to accomplish. What's important to you? I also ask this question, please finish this sentence. Before I die, I must. And what I get out of this series of questions in this series of meetings is, okay, this is what we want to do with our lives. And that might be, we want to send the kids to college. We want to pay for an undergraduate degree, but we don't want to pay for a graduate degree. We want to remodel our kitchen at some point. We know we're not going to stay in this house long term because it's just not built for an 80-year-old. We know we're going to have to move at some point. What does that look like? We want to make sure that we travel a whole bunch before we can no longer travel. We know we're going to have to replace this car in a couple of years, and we actually want to contemplate, for instance, sending kids to private school. Like all of these things are desires, needs, and wants of a client, but they just don't know how to factor all of this in over a longer period of time into their financial well-being. And that's what I do. So after that series of meetings that I've been having and the data they've been inputting, those two conversations then come together at a point where I do what I call a data meeting, like really great title, right? But in that data meeting, what I'm doing is I am saying, okay, have I done the inputs accurately? Have I captured all of those things that you want to do in your life so that we can have conversations now about whether or not you can actually make those things possible, and if so, how and when. So that's what I'm doing with that series of conversations. And then we put all this together into a data meeting where I verify that I have my data accurate, because no point in doing an analysis with bad data. You just get bad results. And then we come together for usually one, but often two, what I call then planning meetings. So the data's in there. It's all accurate. Now let's just go massage the data so that you can see what works and what doesn't in your lives. So I want to show you that software now so that you can see it and you can understand now how all of this stuff fits together. And again, I'm going to do my very level best not to turn this into a software educational exercise. Okay, what I want to show you now is how I integrate those conversations that I've been having with clients and the data that they've inputted for me together so that we can now put together a financial plan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, I don't want this to make this a tour of my financial planning software. Most financial planners use some sort of a software. They all more or less do the same things. I just happened to pick this one because I felt like I did real estate transactions better. And I have a lot of people with real estate. It may not even be true anymore. I made this decision years ago, but this software is just still working for me. And I want you to see that I've made up a client here. They are a happy camper and worries more. This is often a very emotionally common configuration. When I have couples in my office, there's usually somebody who's a little bit more worried, and there's somebody that's a little bit more, what would I say, confident or laid back about their financial future. So that's just how I've named them here. And once they've inputted everything, I can now get a nice overview of how much they have in assets and all of that kind of stuff. What I then want to do with clients, and you'll see here that I have their birthdays and where they live, and I also have their kids in here, so I can see their kids glamper, camper, and sleepy camper, so that, I can keep track of them and their college funding and all of that kind of stuff. And so I have that in here. And then what we also do is we go through a whole variety of things. And like I said, I'm asking them, what do you want to do about college for your kids? And so, for instance, these particular, clients said, we want to pay for college. We want to just sort of base this on, I usually use UC Davis as, a figure for how much they might spend on college. And I just have it inflating with what we consider a college inflation number, not just an economy inflation number. I'm usually using 5 or 6. They'll tell me something like, I want to make sure that we pay for really nice travel, right? So I build that in here. I know they're going to have to replace a car, so I build that in every 10 years or so. And so I've captured everything that's going on in their lives that they know that they're going to do. And I've got their income in here. We can look at their assets, all of the things. I then am able to move to a different part of the software where we're actually able to take a look at some planning. And so we go into something called the Decision Center. And I'm just going to pick one for the moment. And so what they've said to me is, I want to remodel the house. It's going to be a $300,000 remodel. And we need to know whether or not we should just pull out cash, because we've got about $400,000 sitting on the sidelines. Should we pull out cash and do that? We only need $300,000 of it. If we have the other $100,000, do we put that in long-term money? Do we put it into a 529 plan? Do we put it into short-term money in case we need it for the remodel when we have cost overruns, which I almost always tell them are going to happen. So we have that option, and I can then run these different toggles. The other option is to borrow on their equity line to get the remodel done, and to then do something else with that $400,000. So we can do option 1 and option 2. I can then look at, they've also said to me, look, if we have the money and we want to know whether or not we can send our kids to private high school and what that would look like. So I've set up toggles here for Glamper to go to a private high school and for Sleepy to go to private high school. And then they want to know, well, if we do all these things, can we still max out, like I have it as worries, can we max out worries 401k contributions? Can we do all of these things and make it work in our lives? And so now I'm able to toggle these things around. And I play usually as something called the cash flow overview, and I go through a whole set of instructions about what that's going to look like. And, we usually choose, an average market that happens. And I usually work in present value because people can get their heads around the numbers a little bit better, although not always. But it allows me to show them what's going on. And it allows me to show them that red line on top, if you're not color challenged, just look for the red line or the line. I think you can see that no matter what. That's what they need to spend. And the bars that come up to me that represent the money that's going to show up in order to meet those expenses, whether that's from income or for assets later on when they're no longer working. And so when I don't see any gaps, I don't see a gap between that line and those bars, it means I get them to the age 95 without them living in a box under a bridge eating cat food. So I can show them that, yes, if you use the cash for the remodel, that would be okay. We can either transfer money to long-term or short-term money. So you can see what that looks like. And you can see as I toggle things, it's now going to change things. The software does its thing in the background. And now we're able to take a look at, are there gaps here? Does this work? And that's even with, Glamper going to private high school and Sleepy going to private high school and then going off to college. There's some things down here that I have to put in just to make sure that my software has all the toggles that it needs and all the, what I would call options it needs in order to do its analysis. But I can also then max out, what happens if Worries goes ahead and maxes out the 401k. So sometimes clients will ask me, well, what's the impact over the long term of us spending money on private high school, let's say, for example. And now I can say, okay, well, here's where you are now. And sometimes they want to look at really an average market rather than an average of what's happened in the market over long periods of time. We get into all those details and we talk about that and whether or not they want to talk about future value or present value. But what I want you to see here is that I'm just able to show them very quickly, here's the impact. So if they send Glamper to private high school at $60,000 a year for 4 years, and they send Sleepy to private high school over 4 years at $60,000 a year, I can then show them the impact of that over the course of their lifetime. So before they go to high school, right, there's no impact. But then when they go to private high school, not having that money in the market, making money actually has a pretty substantial impact over the long haul. So they're able to look at that. Now, at the end of the day, they still have plenty of money. And most, parents will take a look at that and go, yeah, okay, that might be a sacrifice that we want to make. Or they might say, you know what, that's a sacrifice we don't want to make. But this is how I'm able to take a client's needs, desires, wants, all the things, and put them as a sign of financial value to it and show it to them over the course of their lifetimes, the impact of their decision and can they make it work? And that's really what most of my clients are looking for. And so that's how I'm able to do this. Now, there's all kinds of fun things that I get to play with. I get to play with tax brackets and I get to see things like, woo, look at all the money in this high tax bracket over here. Woo, look, you're hardly paying any taxes in these years. Maybe we should move some of these withdrawals into these years because it would be cheaper. So we have those conversations. Some of the other nasty, horrible things that I get to do for clients is to have them take a look at, okay, what happens if inflation rises to 5% for the rest of your lifetimes? Does that, what is the impact of that? So we'll talk about that. You can see that the graph will change a little bit and, the probability of success is changing. And we just go over what all of those things mean. Again, I'm just trying to put things into context for clients. It's their life. It's their money. They're making the decisions. I'm just trying to show them what the impact is so that they can make good conscious ones. And, I can do this with premature death. If somebody kicks the bucket a little sooner, what does that look like? I can also do things like what happens if everybody needs long-term care over time. There's huge expenses at the end of life. What does that look like? One of the other things that I often do is disability as well. I run all the scenarios. It's what I would call stress testing the portfolio, stress testing the plan. If you do these things, can you still send a kid to a private high school, both kids to private high school, and still be able to pay for things like long-term care? This is what I am doing in my office so that clients can see it. And again, I've kind of made all this up. I want you to take this and look at the graphics of it and understand how all the pieces are coming together. Because look, it's the future. On some level, it's all lies, right? But it's just giving clients some context and some probabilities about what their lives are going to look like moving forward. And here's the other thing that I want to say is that life changes. You need to make mid-flight corrections all the time. And that's why I'm meeting with clients at least on an annual basis about their financial planning. And I usually talk to them mid-year when they have some big thing come up. We got to support mom. We've got to pay for a car we didn't expect. Like we have all those conversations. So, I'm always updating this. And again, I've made up these clients and I have been very particular with my data. I just want you to get a general idea. So for the love of God, don't turn me into my regulatory agencies about this. I just really wanted you to get a sense of what was going on. And the last thing that I want to say, because I think when somebody asked me the question, how are you going to integrate what we want to do into our overall financial plan? I think the underlying question is, well, God, are you going to be able to make this work for me? And it's interesting that people are thinking that, because what I learned recently from another prospective client was that this client wrote, this other advisor's idea of a financial plan is to run a Monte Carlo simulation. And what that really does is just tell you what the likelihood is of success. But if you haven't built in all the things about their lives, it's kind of useless information. And so what I want you to understand is that when I am putting together plans like this for clients, it's not just, Jessica, is your plan and your planning going to work for me? Because it's not really about me. It's about the client. And I will make a plan work for a client in the sense that I will make sure that we are including all the things that the client wants to talk about and everything that they want to cover and all the stress testing that they want to see so that it is their plan. It is about their life. And that's really the place that I come from when I'm working with clients. It's not about what I want to see or what I think your life should be. It's my job to help you see what is possible, help you plan for what you want, and to allow you to make really good decisions about it. So yes, all my plans work for my clients, and my clients are as varied as they come, and it will work for you as well. I'm Jessica Lanning, Lanning Does Planning.